Someone else again. Okay. How many people do not know who Steve Andreas is? Everybody here knows who Steve Andreas is. Well, that's very good, because we're not here tonight to praise Steve Andreas. We are here to roast him. Who knows what a roast is? Well, that's good. You're very, 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 very educated here.
I'm wondering, Brian, if Steve and Connie Ray are actually going to be able to hear us. We'll have to test this.
Turn the volume.
Yeah, I wonder, is there any way that they can...
Call Julius.
Or use a microphone.
He's using a microphone, but I'm not sure she can even hear him. She was saying what?
Hello.
We're in the back.
Give me a 1, 2, 3. Test, test, test.
I might see you, I don't know. Okay.
As we said, we are not here tonight to praise Steve Andreas. We are here to roast him. Why a roast? Well, because...
Can you hear us, Connie Ray?
Yep.
Yeah, why a roast? It's because Steve Andreas is, is getting on a little. And it's high time that we do something to show him what we really think about him. Steve was born in Hawaii. You know those volcanoes in Hawaii? That's not an eruption. That's the last time Steve Andreas lit his birthday cake. I'm not saying Steve is old, but he still has some overdue library books from the Alexandra Library. And, he's so old that his social security number is 42. His first car was a covered wagon. And, he's so old that he knew Abraham Maslow and Fritz Perls and Sigmund Freud and Moses. When Moses was crossing the Red Sea, Steve was on the other side saying, "What are your internal images? Are they moving? Do you see any colors? Are they, make a model?" So, I think of Steve as I do my father. An unrelenting, picky, old, grouchy son of a bitch. And that's, I think, what's important here to do, because, you see, a roast is not actually praising somebody. It's more about, it's traditionally in America, it's about a group of his peers or his commoners in England, and getting together and teasing, insulting, and giving a kind of a tribute and a praise that's easy to do. And, I've always dreamed of doing a roast, Of course, I've always dreamed about sleeping with Scarlett Johansson, too. Guess which one came true? So it all started at the Leadership Summit, where we was thinking, gee, we should, do something for Steve right now, And a lot of people got up some good ideas, which I will share with you tonight. But, this group here, we were thinking, we should give him a Lifetime Achievement Award. And the Carrot Moxon said, great, we've got one of those to give out, and we can give it to Steve instead of making it the usual beauty pageant. But Connie Ray here, she said, whoa, Steve doesn't like those things. He's often said that if he was even offered one, he would refuse it. So we're trying to give him an award that he can't refuse. And Michael Hall said, why don't we give him the NLP Disturber of the Year Award, the Devil's Advocate of the Century Award. Connie Red said, how about some kind of quirky award? Robert, Mr. Diplomacy here, said, why don't we just call it a celebration? But I want to give him the Pain in the Ass Award. Speaking of which, who are the roasters here tonight? Don't we really have a who's who with everyone present of NLP? Or is it a who's care? But anyway, we have a live streaming video connection with Stephen Conneray that you can see in the back of the room. And here we have...
Yes, how about everybody let them know that you know they're there by applauding. They can't see everybody in the room, but they can hear you. So.
Okay, and we have 4 master trainers here, and I'm a masturbator, but they're master trainers, and this represents 160 years of platform speaking between us all. This represents, I didn't give you that many years, I usually get to tell these old jokes because I'm the oldest person in the room. I'm even a couple months older than Frank Puselic, and as Steve knows, he invented NLP. So there's about 100 books between us here, and another 30 or 40 up on the screen too. And with all the thousands of people that we have taught and trained and cajoled, this is a great challenge to us if we can actually be funny on purpose. So we have here Robert Dilts, co-developer of NLP, founder of NLP Academy and dozens of other organizations, famed for being able to write the same NLP book on any subject. Joseph O'Connor, founder of the International Coaching Community and famed for being able to write an NLP on any subject. And Michael Hall, the winner of our competition tonight with 50 books published, founder of Neurosemantics and famed for being able to write more books about any NLP discipline, than anybody else. Michael has never met a discipline he didn't like. Sure, Joseph would write a book like The NLP Art and Practice of Kissing Girls. Robert's title would be How to Kiss Through the Neurological Levels and Disney Strategy. And Michael would write The Magic of Wondering Why One Would Want to Kiss. I wouldn't write a book, I'd just be out kissing girls. So, one last thing I want to do, which is a story I heard from Steve, and this is about his mother, who was, Steve, correct me if it's really yours or not, but it was about his mother, Barry Stevens, who was they both learned psychology at the same time, and they both were writing, and Barry had written a book with Carl Rogers, Person to Person, and Steve said, well, let's start Real People Press to publish it, it's real, mother and son team. And so Steve told the story, I believe, or somebody else did, or I made it up, that Barry was once working in a Indian reservation, and she was talking with some big official, administration and so forth, and they were walking around, and there was this one indigenous gentleman that was washing the floors. And the big government official, he stepped in a little water, and he just got, really irritated and started grumbling towards the Indian. And the Indian looked at the official with such a pure and perfect gaze of equality that the official's anger just disappeared. And Barry, standing here, she was just incredibly impressed with the power and the wonder of this Indian. That was such an incredible person. And the Indian looked at Connie Ray with the same, at Barry, with the same perfect, pure gaze of equality. And all of Barry's incredible adulation and envy and awe just disappeared. So that's one of the things I learned about Steve Andreas, in that there's some things in life that are much more beautiful and much better being equal to than being better of. So, let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
Think about it. When you're joking, when you're having a humorous response to something, there's really no way to do it other than popping out for a while, looking at yourself, and sort of putting a different frame around what's happening, such that it's funny. It's a real valuable way of dissociating. We believe that dissociation is the essence of a lot of humor, not all. There's different kinds of humor and so on. But we definitely recommend it. Now, Lauren, would you imagine now that one of these little critters came?
Okay.
What's it like? Still have it?
No.
This was Steve's original tape about using the VK dissociation, which he recently showed at a convention of doctors working on PSTD solutions. And here's Steve saying that, one of the greatest interventions is humor, and one of the greatest tests is laughter. So, one of the things I've tried, we have certain world premieres here tonight. And one of the world premieres, one of the world premieres is this we call the Livre d'Or, which is a French classy way of saying a guest book. And this is a guest book of 36 pages up till now, which Steve has seen for the first time right now. And it's contributions from many, many people all over the world talking about Steve and their remembrances and sending wishes and criticisms and everything else that they want to say. This is now available for you at this link. You can look at it or download it. Please download it, because when you see it on the net, all the format gets fucked up. So this is something that's going to be on an open page. So if you want to add a comment or add your own well wishes for Steve, you can do that. Eventually, after a couple months, we're going to publish it into more of a bound edition. And So there are a lot of people that have sent things in. So the next person is one of the people who sent in a video instead of writing something. And some people did both, but this is pretty interesting.
We're gonna need this sound.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Steve. This is
Sorry.
not really comfortable roasting you, although I boil you.
Okay.
You have enough?
Good.
Hi, Steve. This is supposed to be a roast of you, and I'm
Oh,
not
oh,
really
oh.
comfortable roasting you, although I boil you in a minute. On a serious note, you've done a lot with Critical Voices, and I really respect the work that you've done. And actually, I have a critical voice in my head, and his name's Steve Andreas. And it's actually quite a good voice, though, because over the years you've really taught me a lot, and I wouldn't even call it a critical voice, I'd call it a mentor voice. And I can't even list all the things that you have taught me, the personal one-on-one time that you've taken with me, but one of the greatest things I love that I learned from you is how to start a training, and that when you train, you walk into the room and just make yourself look busy and take charge of the room and move the flip chart around. And so every day that I walk into the training room at the start of the day, I'm always thinking of you, and I'm always hearing those words of wisdom to take charge. And there's so much more, but I know I don't have enough time, but I do have to go train today, right now in Tokyo, Japan, and I'll be taking you with me. So thank you, Steve, for all the good that you've done over the years.
Okay, we'll pause. We have to put down this one. Okay, so how did Steve come up with an idea like this?
Well, the videotape quality on this piece is not up to our usual standards. We thought that the content of the piece warranted our using it anyway. You'll notice on this first demonstration that the client is initially surprised and a bit shocked at the power that the swish has on her. While this does demonstrate how impactful it is for her, we want you to know that for most people, doing the swish is a very comfortable process.
I'm going to start by demonstrating the swish, and we're going to spend a lot of time in the next 2 days on the swish pattern. There is what's now called the traditional swish, which I want to start out with because it's simple. And I like to teach simple at first. That's how I learn best anyway. And I think it's how you learn thoroughly. Yeah, start out with that, and then we'll go and we'll get fancier and fancier. Because there are a lot of real slick things you can do with the swish, and you can have very, very powerful impacts. I want to introduce it with a nice little story, one of my favorites. In the Army once, there was this guy who, one morning, everybody started noticing he was a bit strange. So, just go around everywhere, you know, and he just went around. No? So they sent him over to Section 8. And he's there in the psychiatrist's desk, looking all over the desk and doing all this stuff. And no, I can't find it. What's on that? Son, what are you looking for? I don't know. What does it look like? I don't know. And he's looking around like this the whole time. So after several sessions, the guy says, well, son, I think the Army's been a little too tough for you. I think we better give you a Section 8 discharge. And he goes over and I says, there it is.
Okay. So that's Steve moving around very fast at the beginning of a training. But we should have a little more idea of who Steve is historically. So for that, we have a person that has followed Steve and has adored and agreed with his every word through all his existence to tell us a little about Steve's life, L. Michael Hall.
When you look at Steve's resume, I've got a 14-page summary of it. It's videos, it's articles, year after year, decade after decade, books, all the things he's been doing with trainings, the education that he's had, who he worked with. When you look at that resume, it is impressive. Steve Andreas got a chemistry degree originally. Then he went to psychology and he studied under Abraham Maslow. Maslow was actually his mentor. He then became the president of Gestalt Association, and then he published his first book with his mother Barry Stevens and Carl Rogers. He created the first NLP training center, NLP Comprehensive. He ran a publishing company, Real People Press, putting out many of the NLP books that we all love and have read. He edited many, many books. He authored many, many more. A prolific author of hundreds of articles covering 4 or 5 decades. It truly is breathtaking. So, this man of the hour who worked closely with Richard Bandler and John Grinder in the early days, and then with Connie Ray Andreas, they produce the 4 books that put NLP on the map. Frogs and Princes, Transformations, Reframing, Using Your Brain for a Change. Frogs and Princes was the book that hooked me. That was the book that did it. You brought me in. You can't get me out. Transformations. In the first few years, it sold 350,000 copies. No other book has come even close to that. So they put NLP on the map, and we're here this evening to honor and to recognize that. These were the books that made NLP understandable. So these were the books that, without them, I wonder if NLP would have even be existing today. It was his degree in chemistry, or was that alchemy? that Steve used his mind, his chemistry mind, to do his refined distinctions in human consciousness and create so many submodality patterns. Now, Steve Andreas didn't start out as Steve Andreas. He started out as John O. Stevens. Then he changed his name to Steve Stevens.
Alliteration.
And then he changed his name to Steve Andreas. So no wonder, many years later, he wrote the book, Transforming Yourself, Becoming the You Who You Want to Be. Before NLP, he was a renowned Gestalt therapist and author. He actually knew Fritz Perls when Perls was alive, before Richard and John modeled him when he was dead. As an entrepreneur and as a businessman, he brought business savvy to NLP as he created NLP Comprehensive. As a publisher, Real People Press, then he became a trainer and a researcher and a debater. I should know. Who is Steve Andreas? Steve Andreas is the George Washington of NLP centers. Steve Andreas is the Batman of mismatching. He's the J. Edgar Hoover of the Internet NLP videos. He's the Inspector Clouseau of Finer Distinctions. He's the Martha Stewart of Household Hints. He's to Robert and I, he's the Judas of logical levels. And to me, he's the Grand Inquisitor of the meaning of meta. Now, people who don't know Steve Andreas, they often confuse him with a movie star from Star Wars, Chewbacca. But Chewbacca's less frightening. Now, Steve Andreas is a mismatcher, maybe the greatest the world has ever known. He invented the words, yes, but. He coined the proverb, behind every silver lining is a cloud. He wears old blue jeans 3 sizes too big, and so he has to keep pulling them up. And he wears his sandals over white socks. The man of the hour tonight needs no introduction, but he does need a design consultant, fashion consultant. Now, believe it or not, Steve Andreas can match. Recently, he went through 30 videos of NLP trainers on the internet doing the swish pattern. Now, it's true, he did find 29 of them did it wrong. But he can match because he found one who did it right. Himself. Now, it's said that he used to be arrogant and obnoxious, but with NLP, all that changed, and today it's the very opposite. He's obnoxious and arrogant. No, actually, he doesn't put on airs. He has a problem putting on his pants. Someone said he has a split personality, but that's not true, because if he had a split personality, he wouldn't be using this one. Someone said he's a nerd. But I say no. But then there is that video where he demonstrated he could extend his underwear over his head. Steve is troubled by my use of the word meta. That's entirely my fault, because when he brought it up, I said, good meta you. He said that's not a legitimate use of the word meta. So we began a debate, and we effectively wrote articles for 8 months in which we effectively bypassed each other in terms of understanding. When I read Six Blind Elephants, a part of me wanted to object because I felt that he had misrepresented what I said about meta and metastates. I wanted to be upset, but I couldn't because I had just read his book on the forgiveness pattern of Virginia Satir. So if I was upset, did that mean I hadn't forgiven? But if I forgave, does that mean I can object? So the next time I saw him, I said, good to meet you. Steve is a great modeler, we all know, and his books Change Your Mind, Keep the Change, Heart of the Mind, extended the NLP model to many, many submodality patterns and excellent models that you and I now use. Recently, in preparing for this role, someone told me that he never farts. I was amazed. Then it was discovered why.
I got to tell you that it's hard to keep Steve down because he heard about this a couple days ago, and so for the last 4 nights I've been getting email from Steve, and he just says that, keep giving me jokes for everything. So he said the original title of that book was Fart of the Mind. Fart of the Mind.
Well, here's a latest discovery. The reason why he doesn't fart is that he is such a tight ass that when he farts, only dogs can hear.
Well, Steve's
but what's even worse is he wants to now model that. Steve, I honor you for all your contributions to NLP. I respect your integrity. I admire your resilience in the face of that lawsuit. I love you for who you are. We all do.
You have no idea how many people out there appreciate Steve Andreas, and probably he doesn't either. But there was one little group here. It's called the NLP Rest and Recreation. Oh no, the Recognition and Research Organization, and they got together, and with Steve was a major contributor and founder of it all, and they got together and they said, it's interesting because Steve has written a lot of books, but and this is a world premiere. Nobody has ever seen this before, and not even Steve, that these guys decided to get together and write a book about Steve Andreas. Because Steve with his 80 combined years of writing and publishing, his 30 books, his 33 videos, his 112 articles, his 6 NLP training manuals, everything he's done, not many people know it all comes from one source. So here is the cover of the book that is coming out in 2 or 3 months about Steve and Connie Ray Andreas and their work. It was put together by Rick Gray, Frank Bork, and Will Murray, and they decided that it was time to talk about Steve and everything he's done. They have to this day they have finished 90% of this book, and they're sorry they couldn't get it in time for this presentation, but it's going to be out in a couple of months. These guys are. Next slide. Okay, there's Rick Gray up there, and he's a therapist. And what else do you know about Rick Gray?
Researcher.
Yeah, right. Frank Bork has been working in medical and psychological research for many, many, many years, right? And Will Murray is kind of interesting because he's a triathlon champion too. The kind of people, the kind of guy you need to keep up with, Steve. And he's the guy who's the main author of it. So this is the table of contents of the book, Fine Distinctions, The Life and Works of Steve and Connie Ray Andreas. And it's going to be in the handouts, it's going to be in the Livre d'Or that's on the internet right now. So if you want to check it for yourself, we don't have enough time to go through all the chapters, but as you can see, it's about a great deal of our shared history. So, what will Steve say about it? Well, I don't know. It's been keeping me up nights, and, I'm very anxious about it. And, I've been mixing up my words because, I'm, insomniac, dyslexic, agnostic. And you know what happens when you cross an agnostic and a dyslexic and an insomniac? I stay up all night wondering if there's a dog.
Some people have dog guilt. The dog poops on the floor and they go like this, right? And will they do it again? Yes.
And will they do it again? Yes, they will. Would you like to intervene here after the next slide?
Yes, sure.
Okay. And now Joseph O'Connor has a few words to say for Steve.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, Brian. I don't really know about roasting. I'm a Brit, so I just wanted to pay my respects to Steve. I was taken by the hat, though. That's an Irish fisherman's hat. And you may not know this, but Steve was originally Irish, John O. Stevens, okay? And he did change his name to, as we know, he just swapped them around and moved them about, and that's pretty good. And it made me wonder how many other people have actually changed their names from the beginning of NLP. Harry and Dizzy and Horse, might have done something like that. I didn't need to change my name, but my name is actually shared by 2 other people. One is a very good Irish novelist, and I keep getting invited on Irish radio. And the other was, and this is true, someone on the Interpol top 10 most wanted list, Joseph Anthony O'Connor. This was very embarrassing every time I went through airport security. It's a little room with 1 chair and 2 large policemen. Anyway, but when I first started NLP, many years ago, I read Steve's books. They were fantastic, especially the strategies. The strategies were amazing. The criticism strategy, the swish, the compulsion blowout. Man, I loved that compulsion blowout. I did it over and over and over again. It was just so great. I had to swish myself out of it. It's incredible. And when I first started NLP, I was a musician. I was audio kinesthetic. I had no visual whatsoever. And Steve helped me with visual. Those books helped me a lot with visual. I used to park my car. I could never find it. I knew I parked it opposite a house where someone was playing the trumpet, but street? No, definitely not. And from Steve's idea was, well, use your strengths, strategy strengths, kinesthetic. The kinesthetic car finding strategy, which is basically, you have your car key, and this was in the old days, okay, when a car key really was a car key, it opened the car. It's not really fair now. You can get one of these things and beep, and it all lights up and honks. That's cheating. But this was a real car key. And I used to go around and, try the locks. And the one that opened was mine. But there were two disadvantages to this strategy. The first was one night when I did get in a car that was more or less my colour. It opened, I got in, but there was some stuff on the passenger seat that wasn't mine, and the ignition didn't start, and it wasn't actually my car, so I got out of that quickly. And the other thing was, after the second time I was arrested, it didn't really work, so can't really do that. Steve, you live in Colorado. Now, Colorado is an interesting place because, if I remember rightly, it was the first place to legalize cannabis. So I have an idea for you. I think that your next book, you need to write the Colorado Cookbook, Updated Strategies for NLP when you're stoned. Now, this would be great because, just think about it. You've got the swish. Yeah. And again. Compulsion blowout. More. Yeah. In case you missed the last bit, didn't I? What else? Oh, criticism strategy. Yeah. I can't hear you. Talk louder. Or the Disney strategy. Now, this is one for you, okay? Disney strategy. In the Colorado Cookbook for stoned people. So you've got to start with a dreamer, of course. Hey man, that's great. Look at those stars, they're amazing. Yeah. What do you think, man? I think we need a plan here. I think we need to do something. Yeah, I got 22 ways to make deep-fried Mars bars. What do you think? Okay, but we've got to find a deep fry. I don't know where we can find that around Heathrow or the Mars bars. But I'm sure we can work out on something. Yeah, let's ask Einstein. It says that the thinking that you have on the problem thinking is the thinking that you don't need in the problem when you're thinking or something. Yeah, you got it wrong. We need a plan. Yeah, but what does our third guy think? I think that you're both full of shit. I think we can improve this a lot. This is crazy now, come on. Sorry, I don't know how Sean Connery got to be the critic, but anything can happen in the Colorado Cookbook. Yeah, this is crazy. Come on, go, get on with it. Hey, I love you, man. Come on, it's gone, yeah. Plan. I'm out of here. I could really improve this strategy. This is crazy strategy. I've lost my accent. It's a crazy strategy. And I could improve it anyway. And why am I always the bad guy? So, this is the next book for you, okay? Definitely a good idea. I think you should write it, and I will certainly buy one. We love you. We're here for you. Thank you, Steve.
And there's some other people that also send in their video messages, and we can't show them all tonight, but we've got some samples of some of them. No, it's yeah, I'm on. And
so Steve and I met at a Gestalt therapy conference that Steve had organized in Estes Park, Colorado. This was back in 1975 when I was just starting a PhD program in clinical psychology at Colorado University. But my strongest interest was always in the experiential approaches. So I went to this conference with some of my clinical psych friends, and afterwards, Steve was leading a Gestalt workshop in Denver, and one of my friends convinced me to go along with her. That's where I really met Steve. The Gestalt workshop was a small group. The participants were very open, very ready to explore and learn, and Steve was being a very kind and open-hearted and even vulnerable leader for the group. This was very attractive to me. He was like a big teddy bear, very warm, open-hearted, and sincere, and this is what I fell in love with. Then Steve moved to Boulder to be with me, and he scheduled another workshop, a Gestalt workshop, and I went to this one too. Now in this workshop, the people weren't also open and ready to explore, and Steve thought several were being what Fritz Perls called gamey. So Steve was quite challenging and even harsh with them, in my opinion. I was surprised. This wasn't the person I knew and that I'd fallen in love with. And I said to Steve, how could you treat them like this? You were so kind the last time. And he said, well, Fritz Perls used to do this. In fact, Fritz would have been a lot harsher. And I said, well, I still don't like it. Not at all. But I've already fallen in love with you, so it's too late.
Marriage. It's not a word, it's a sentence. For Stephen Connery Andreas, it was 30 books. 530 if you count all the people that plagiarized from their books. If you think of Tony Robbins' plagiarisms, you know, he sold 2 million copies on for each of his first 2 books. And Steve, he's listed 2 million on Amazon's list of bestsellers. In fact, if you take a look at his magnum opus on Amazon in France, the first line is, "Be the first to give a review. Be the only one, please." 6 Blind Elephants. I've had the 2 volumes on my bedroom table for the last 10 years. And every time I have difficulty going to sleep, it's there. Steve, you've always served me. But didn't anyone in real estate ever tell you why they call a property an elephant? Because, not gray ones. So, I'm thinking about all the people that have made contributions to this. We have some people that gave, very, very, sweet and wonderful and adoring videos of, like the next one, which is really good.
Hey, Steve. This is John Lentz. I'd like to take this opportunity to let you know that I deeply appreciate the kindness that you've offered to me in the past years. And I especially would like to thank you for the ways that you have treated me like a colleague. You were certainly the first nationally recognized person to come to my workshops.
And this is Steve Lentz, who is doing some work, I think, in hypnosis, and he's a minister and everything like that. And this is an example. One of the reasons I'm doing this, I've only been with Steve maybe 4 or 5 days in my life. When I had an NLP center in San Francisco, he and Connie Ray came over and did strategies for 2 or 3 days. Then I invited him over to teach in Paris for 2 or 3 days. And then my mother died in Colorado, and so I stayed with him for a couple days, and Steve loaned me his car and everything like that. And the thing is that, like John Lentz says, Steve has always been there, when, even though I hardly knew him, he did things like it was for, my lifelong friend. So it takes a couple hours or a couple minutes with Steve sometimes to make a lifelong friend with him. And there are many, many different friends that have contributed to the show tonight. And the next one is really kind of funny too.
Hi Steve, I guess you're being roasted today, and of course turnabout's fair play. You've been roasting people for a long time. One of the things that occurred to me is you've been great at mismatching things to try to improve quality, but sometimes people take that as pretty negative criticism. But you've given us tools to deal with it. We've got the responding to criticism strategy, you've got a great forgiveness process, and one of my favorite ones you've always said is when you have a voice in your head that feels critical, put it in the toe to get some distance from it. And you can, of course, put it in your toe. There are probably lots of toes with your voices in it in the field of NLP. But I like to put it in my shoe, because I can always take my shoe off, slide my shoe into the closet, close the door, and walk in the other room. But you've been roasting other things for years too. I remember when the NLP conference was happening at NLP Comprehensive many years ago, and they had a wonderful, lovely slogan, which was, NLP's the wind beneath your wings. And you said, well, as long as it's not the wind between your thighs. And I thought at the time, well, you've spent a career keeping it from being the latter, so good on you.
We got a lot of fart jokes tonight, don't we? So, Steve's been at a lot of different conferences, and a lot of different people have been sending in their wishes for the Lever Door, and there's a great tradition in people saying that, maybe Steve was being a little too picky, and that reminded me of the following video.
Okay, good. Now, my last question is even weirder. As it goes from your neck down your body, which way does it spin?
This way.
Okay, so it's going like this. You know which way. I don't know. You know which way. Now, what I want you to try is put yourself in one of these situations that would make you anxious, like driving across the desert. And feel it start in your neck and move down your body. But this time, I want you to do the following in a moment, not yet. I want you to reverse the direction of spin, change the color to a color you like better, and add some sparkles to it. And just do that and find out what happens.
Feels better. Feels a lot better.
You done it already?
I did.
Okay.
Precision. Steve's always been known for precision. He says, you don't have to know about internal combustion. I'm not interested about seeing Ferraris and fancy cars. Steve likes to get old cars and fix them and put them together. You don't need to know nuclear science or neuroscience to fix a car. He just wants to know how to fix a car. But being practical is not his only side. There are other sides that were confided to us by one of the co-conspirators in our Steve Andreas Roast group.
Looking back on our times together, we've had fun times, meaningful times, and definitely our share of difficult times too. And I can't imagine another partner who could be more right for me. Where it hasn't been easy are the places I've come to recognize that I need to learn and grow. One thing that's made our partnership good is that each of us has added to what the other can do. Through our partnership, each of us has been able to be more and contribute more than if either of us had been doing it alone. I know this is true for me. So thank you for your ideas and insights. You raise really good questions, which have often started fun and productive discussions. For a number of years, we spent time each year in Kauai, Hawaii, and we had a daily routine of walking along the beach together. When we'd get to the end of the bay, we'd find a large rock to sit on and ponder questions while we were watching the waves rise and fall back into the ocean. Now we sometimes do this looking out at the cliffs in our backyard. Somehow nature seems to add to the conversation. It's you and me, and nature also has a voice. I value those times.
And now, let's hear a word from
Hi, Steve. It's me. Actually, what I wanted to share is I knew, well, actually, I think it was 40 years ago last month that Steve and Connie Ray first had me come to NLP Colorado, as it was then, it was before NLP Comprehensive. It was the first time I ever taught outside of California, so it's been 40 years, and that sort of launched my career, so very grateful for that. But I actually knew Steve and knew of Steve long before that. There was, when I was probably, 16 or 17, one of my favorite books that was really inspired me as a teenager was a book called Notes to Myself by Hugh Prather, who was an author. And it's a wonderful book if you've never read it. It's now sold, 5 million copies or something. And Hugh Prather was a guy that was, basically a poet, would write these notes, and it kept trying to get it published. Nobody had ever published any of his stuff. I think he'd been doing things for years, and he sent it to Real People Press. And he said, the publisher called me the next day. And he said, I'd never had a more honest publisher. He said that, he told me I could probably get better royalties from a bigger company, but, I really wanted to publish this book. And so he published that, and that was a launching of another career. And I think Steve has been, and Connie Ray, and they've been some of the first people to hire many of us who have gone on in, our own careers. And then, I'd also read another book back when it was John O. Stevens called Awareness. I see a few heads nod. It was one of the best books I ever read. It's all the practices for expanding awareness. And then there was Gestalt Therapy Verbatim. So long before I ever met Steve, I knew about who he was. And I think at that time, in the 70s, Steve was teaching at the Diablo Valley Junior College in Concord, California, which is not that far from where I live. And Terry McClendon, who was another, also was with me when Steve first hired us. In those days, you always taught with a partner, because Bandler and Rinder always taught together. We would never even think of teaching by ourselves, so they hired me and Terry to come. And I remember Terry was telling me, oh yeah, Steve Andreas, he was a teacher at this other college, but his classes were more like Gestalt groups than they were, classes. He said that the rumor was, if you cried in Steve's class, you got an A. But I know that it was more than just that. I actually have a very dear friend. His name is Kulani Kamahao now. Her name was Judy back then, but she was in one of Steve's courses, and she'd had a very difficult childhood. She was an illegitimate child, and had actually been, her first 5 years, was kept locked in a basement room. She was going through a big healing process, and was in one of Steve's classes. And Steve really helped her, mentored her to actually reconnect with her birth mother. She'd been adopted by somebody else. So, Steve has been changing lives in many ways. Long before he knew NLP, Steve was changing lives. But then, as I said, was first went to NLP Colorado. What I remember, when a lot of the times, when we do these seminars, and then also stay at Steve and Connie Ray's house in between, we would also go, in those days, because of his success as a publisher, Steve was able to buy a very large property near Moab, Utah, called Shura. It was intended to be a Gestalt community back in those days, where you'd go there, and it's on the Colorado River, and I remember going down the Colorado River with Connie Ray and Steve and Terry. So we spent a lot of time together, not just in the seminars. But that's also where I sort of learned some of Steve's most interesting habits. Like at least I don't know if it's still true, but in those days, the only ice cream Steve would eat was vanilla ice cream, and he could eat a whole half a gallon after dinner, so I remember. Steve's favorite breakfast food was Raisin Bran. I don't know if you know Raisin Bran, but he would always say Raisin Bran, but then he would sit and pick out every raisin and put them in a different bowl and then just eat the bran. Well, that's a metaphor for something. And I remember actually first, when Terry and I would first explain some of these NLP things that Steve became, embraced very fully, later on, Steve, I remember you saying at one point, it was, you heard in your father's voice, in your ear, the word "horseshit." It was like, that was the first reaction to most of what we were trying to teach there. And I remember, I think Terry and I were the first ones to put Connie Ray into a trance. And I remember that it was when Connie Ray's finger started moving in this kind of idiomatic way. I think we were doing a double induction or something. And it was after that Steve started becoming a little bit more of a believer. Anyway, over the years we've had so many different relations together, I sometimes talk about I've written like 25 books and still yet to write one that Steve doesn't criticize or would like. I think in one of my last books on, I think it was the NLP, the Next Generation, I was talking about the Gaia hypothesis and how this notion that the Earth sort of has its own ecosystem, it's like a living being, and that I think it's like the salinity of the earth, the water in the oceans is something like 35%. And Steve wrote this email going, how can you, this is a total trash. It's like, it's 32%, not 35. This is like, Anyway, it's that we joke about and that we also love about you, Steve. And we've had many conversations that are, have been those that I will keep in my mind forever. I thought I might just end by, I wanted to read a little bit from Hugh Prather's book, Notes to Myself, because it reminded me a lot of Steve and this whole idea of not wanting or needing, this kind of acknowledgement. And I think Steve, like me, and I think the others of us who do develop things, you don't develop things to get an accolade. You develop it because it's what you do. Right? It's your life. And there's a section in Notes to Myself where Hugh Prather says, after I'd written this book, which was the Notes to Myself, I told several friends, and their reaction was polite and mild. Later, when I was able to tell them that the book was going to be published, most of them responded with the words, I'm proud of you, proud of the results, but not of the action. He said, everyone but I must look back on my behavior. They can only see my acts coupled with their results. But I must act now without knowing the results. Thus I give my actions their only possible meaning for me. And true meaning always issues from, I choose to respond from this part of myself and not from that part. He says, I don't live in a laboratory. I have no absolute way of knowing what effects my conduct will have. To live my life for the outcome is to sentence myself to continuous frustration, to hang over my head, the threat that death may at any moment make having lived a waste. The only sure reward is in my actions, not from them. The quality of my reward is in the depth of my response, the centralness of the part of me that I act from. Because the results are unpredictable, no effort of mine is doomed to failure, and even a failure will not take the form I imagine. It will be interesting to see what happens in a more realistic attitude towards future consequence than worry, excitement, dejection, irritation, and assumed knowledge of the results that I cannot possess. And Stephen, knowing you, I know that that's always the part that you've acted from. and one of the things I wrote in that lead door is I said, I know that we haven't always seen eye to eye, for sure, but I think we've always connected heart to heart. And that's what I will, forever take with me. So I love you, Steve. Thank you. One last thing, I do have to comment. I always like to, I think when you look at people, there's the books that Steve wrote, we've been talking about all those things, but I didn't see a single mention on here of any of Steve's or Connie Ray's children. And I just want to say, if you judge somebody by the quality of their children, I think the quality of, I know just having met Mark and spent some time with him last December, it's a higher quality than any book that's been written. So congratulations on bringing many wonderful things into the world.
As I told you, Steve's been sending in his 2 cents, so he said that, how about these jokes? Why don't they have a misunderstandings pageant? Well, I'm just here to put away the chairs after all this is over. So, think of the 3 most intelligent people you know. Who are the other 2? That's a good one for you, Steve. Now, also, he wanted me to talk about something. He sent me 2 nights ago, in the middle of the last 15th revision of all this, he said, if you have a serious moment, would you please put this in? And he sent me something that he had written in 1962, even before he met Fritz Perls. And he was a instructor in a junior college of psychology. And he wrote this paper, which you can find at steveandreas.com, articles, determinism. He wrote an article about determinism, prerequisite for a meaningful freedom, by Steve Andreas, formerly Stevens. And this was an incredible article. It quoted practically all the people, it quoted many of the people that Bandler and Grinder based their work on later. It was very, very sophisticated, very wise, and it got into some of the basic philosophical problems of NLP. So he mentioned that he was very proud of this, and I don't know if he really is or it was just a joke to keep me up at night. But you can get it there. The other thing that he said that we might be interested in is that he's been an art collector for many, many years, the world's foremost authority on the works of CharlesPartridgeAdams.com. And Steve has many, many paintings that he's collected, that he's annotated, that he shows, and he's ready to sell now, too. So if you want to find out about Steve's art collection career, try CharlesPartridgeAdams.com. And we got some more people that made some comments. One of them is a very famous...
You can argue against any topic that we in NLP can present is a matter of fact. And everyone recognizes. But also...
That's the next one.
It's missing?
No.
No, really?
It's the one after this. Let's talk about it first.
London. It's not there. Oh, okay. Well, there was one about... I'll do it. There's one from Steve Langton, who...
he find it, the video.
Huh?
Can we just play the
A video.
From the...
And he's a noted psychologist, and he was the person that said he introduced Steve to NLP for the first time, and he sent a very interesting message.
It's coming. Here it is.
Hi, Steve. Steve Langton here. I wanted to let you know that you're always a part of my fondest memories. I read long ago Gestalt Therapy verbatim and Don't Push the River, and that was my introduction to Gestalt Therapy, which led me to the best 4.5 training years of my life, I think, when I took weekly training in Gestalt Therapy and TA. And that was all because of you taking the time to publish those books out of your garage. And you invited me to teach in December of 1978. And I was supposed to be there on the 2nd of December, but there was a huge snowstorm that blocked traffic, and I didn't get there till the 3rd. And when I arrived, you had kept the entire training group waiting for me and ready to proceed. That's when I introduced you to NLP. And then, as I recall, there was a little therapy demo because you and Connie Ray had some sort of a bonding issue. And I hope you'll forgive me for that. After all, you did get married.
Connie Ray does not like this video. She feels that Langton is taking credit for a lot of things that he doesn't deserve. However, you've got to remember, Steve was 49, Connie Ray was 21 when they met. And as you remember, they met at a Gestalt seminar, which Steve was organizing. Now, I don't have any right to criticize about what I'm going to say, because I lived with my first NLP trainer for 3 years. I married a student in Paris, and we were married 14 years, my own personal best. And the mother of my current daughter was a student also, and she's 19 years younger than I. So I beat you out, Steve. And I'm not alone, you know. In NLP, we love our students. Judith Delosier was a student of John Grinder. After that, Carmen Bostic St. Clair was one too. Lester Cameron Bandler LeBeau was a student of Richard Bandler and a teacher of Michael LeBeau. Andrea Lagas, I think, was a student of Joseph O'Connor. Sort of, yeah. And Deborah Bacon was Robert's translator at my institute in Paris. So back then, that's what we called the We Too movement.
Hello, Steve. Saying that you can argue against any topic that we in NLP can present is a matter of fact, and everyone recognizes. But also, all of us recognize how well sustained is that argument that you present. And I want to address another part of you and recognize the humanistic part of you.
Now, thanks to Steve and Connie Ray, you may know or not know, 90% of the practitioner trainings in the world have the same content because they wrote the manual and everybody bought it. I bought it too, you know. It was printed on blue paper so you couldn't photocopy it. So all my trainers had black photocopies of the manual. And 90% of the master practitioner trainers in the world do not have the same content because Steve and Connie Ray never published their manual, which I understand might come in the future. John Grinder was really pissed off at Steve and Connie Ray because they made NLP so teachable. You know, Richard had some, you know, comments too, but both John and Richard, they didn't really want to make NLP teachable. They didn't want to have all you people here in this room today. Their model was, Castaneda and the Brujo Don Juan. lots of a mystery school, working on one person with lots of psychedelics. Well, Richard, you know, he followed Mr. Mescalito for many, many years, and I don't know if he stopped, but, you know, don't blame me, you know, I'm not making this up. If you look at the second volume of their book on Milton Erickson, it is dedicated to Folgers Coffee, Mazda, the car for the thinking man, and a little snow in summer. Now, but, you know, back in those days, I only took cocaine because I liked the way it smelled.
All right, so here is a special greeting from one of the founders.
I've just recently heard that Steve Andreas has taken ill, and my name is Richard Bandler. I want to wish him all the best. Steve Andreas holds a special place in the history of neurolinguistic programming. He was the first nationally recognized figure, not to say that it was great, but to actually give up what he was doing and switch his career around and start teaching NLP and learning NLP and spreading NLP around the planet through publishing and through a lot of the things that he did, teaching around the world. Although later in life, him and I had some disagreements about intellectual property rights, that does not detract from the value of what he did, nor the fact that as a person, I wish him all the best. I hope whatever life he has left is spent in quality time, and I want Steve to know I appreciate all that he did for the work that I created and have expanded over the years.
Well, if you can ignore the embedded commands, Steve, you know, this is really classic Bandler. But we have other kinds of messages too.
When I find myself in time of trouble, Steve Andreas standing next to me, he says, speaking words of wisdom, let NLP. And in my hour of darkness, he is always standing right in front of me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. He says, NLP, 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 NLP. There will be an answer. NLP will set you free. Dear Steve, I hope you will keep creating wonderful tools like you have. It changes people's life. You know, this EMI that you gave me, it was just so fantastic. And I hope I'll see you soon. Mwah! Ciao.
You always want to know how things really work. You always want to know how things fit together. And you always have an interest in how what you do can be of service. And this I respect. I appreciate especially your kindness. It's what I fell in love with in the beginning, and it's only gotten stronger. Often it comes out in practical ways. You sometimes tell people, Connie Ray is sensitive to people's feelings, while I'm sensitive to them in practical ways, and I agree. When guests come over, often it's you who anticipates practical ways to make them comfortable. When a partnership is working really well, I think at some point each begins learning the other's strengths. I've been enjoying the ways that this is happening between us. I never thought you would help me be more tactful, but now sometimes you're my tact advisor. You've said, I think you came on kind of strong there, or I think it'd help if you would listen more. You were right, and it's been fun for me to get this kind of advice from you. And I'm doing my best to absorb your practical skills too. One more thing I enjoy, is watching you play with the grandkids. Even though it's difficult now because moving and talking takes a lot of effort, you still do it. It's heartwarming to see you watch them, to see you match them in simple ways that they respond to. I have much love and appreciation for our many years together, and I'm thankful in advance for whatever we still have. Thank you.
We have a mic here if anybody else would like to say hello to Steve. We have another 7 or 8 minutes for the room, and so if you'd like to say anything, you can borrow this microphone.
Hi Steve, we never got to meet, but I've met Connie Ray and trained with Connie Ray a couple of years ago doing wholeness. I've been here today at the conference presenting your integral eye movement therapy. So Andy Austin trained me, but I know that you've mentored him and helped him develop his metaphors work and his eye movement stuff. So through your work, you've created something that has been presented this afternoon at the conference. So I came straight over from presenting to here to come to your roast. So thank you so much.
Hi Steve, it's Mary Lucivi. I don't know if you remember me, but my husband Jerry and I took your 15-day submodality training back in Boston when Steve Josephs ran the NLP Institute, Massachusetts Institute, and that work has impacted me throughout my life, as well as all of your books. And Jerry's read 6 Blind Elephants 3 times. God bless you.
Last call. I've been here 2 days in London. I haven't had a beer yet. Any last words?
I think, first of all, I just want to thank all of you who came for being here. I think as much as we all know and think we know about Steve, there's always more to learn, there's always more dimensions. So I hope that there's been some new insights, some new understandings for you. I think maybe the last thing I would say is that, having been around in NLP since pretty much almost the beginning, there's a lot of people that came and learned to do NLP, but I think it's pretty obvious that Steve and Connie Ray are those that live NLP and are not just through their books and through their techniques helping us, but through the way they live. So I want to just say thank you for being role models to all of us.
When the final history of NLP is written, I think we'll know a lot more about what Steve and Connie Ray has contributed to this field. I think we're so early in even looking back to see who has made this possible. But as people, as couples like Steve and Connie Ray, who have made it possible for us to be here and for us to understand NLP and for us to spread it to other people. And so I don't think the history is yet to even hardly be written about the influence that you've had and how now it is spreading out through thousands of us. And so we all honor you for that.
Millions.
By the way, I'm not sure who said it, but he said if the Buddha was going to come back today, he would come as a couple. So, hello, Buddha.
Just briefly, thank you, Steve. Your legacy is amazing and continues to spread and influence everybody. Thank you very much.
Hi, Steve. I didn't know that I already know you. And today I have received a resume of the whole history of NLP, being all these people together with you and with you, Connie. And in a few minutes, we're going to have a toast. But now I want to offer you a toast from all of us to you. This is the toast. To you, to us, who are sharing our fears and hopes, who are sharing our fears and lies, and becoming the pilgrims in search of life. Our mission is to be part of the roots of the people, to be willing their minds and their hearts. Our mission is to be close to the people in nature and life, and to lie and to love their lives, and to be together for the rest of our lives. To you, to us, to you, to us.
When people start to ask about NLP, I always say, well, read Frogs into Princes, that's, I know a friend of mine made these guys really understandable. And then I tell the prospective student, and remember my favorite fairy tale about these two princesses that are walking down the road, and one of them looks over, and there's a frog there, and the frog says, "Kiss me, and I'll be your prince." The princess looks at her, picks him up, and throws it into her pocketbook and keeps on walking. The other girl says, "Mate, what are you doing there? Don't you want to have your Prince Charming?" And the other one says, "Oh, hell. There's so many princes around these days, and most of them are broke. But a talking toad is worth a fortune." Goodbye, Steve. See you very, very soon. Thank you, everybody. I think we gave him a very good love letter.
Brian's been up like the last 3 weeks in a row, processing 600 emails from people, sending stuff and putting this together. So truly, I mean, this was a huge labor of love, and you can see how much work went into this.
Best stay in touch. Yes, I will.
Thanks for the song.